No, ours is actually going to look sort of like this. It's a wrap train. Okay, that's good. But it's something like this. Treat yourself.
The tracks. My name is Karen Flannery. I'm a docent for the Chicago Architecture Foundation, and welcome to the Loop Tour Train. The tour today is brought to you by the Chicago Transit Authority, the CTA, the Chicago Architecture Foundation, and the Office of Tourism of the City of Chicago. So, we're going to take 3 trips around the loop. The first time we're going to talk about the history of Chicago and the history of transportation in Chicago. The second time we're going to talk about buildings on the inner side of the loop, which was the side where you boarded the train. The third time we're going to talk about buildings on the outer side of the loop, the other side. On the third time we're going to stop at Quincy and Wells. And if you want to get off at Quincy and Wells, you can. And that's close to where the Sears Tower is. If you do get off at Quincy and Wells, you cannot board the train again. If you don't get off there, you'll end up right back where you started. Some housekeeping rules. No smoking, no walking between cars. Please keep your conversations to a minimum, because if I can't hear myself think, I can't communicate very well. You are able to stand up. We just want people sitting down so that there's not too many people in these cars. And if you want to get up, please remember that we're on an active rail line. So you have to hold on. Do not go too close to the doors. Do not lean against the doors. Hold on. Make sure that you're holding on, because we're going to stop and start and stop and start. So if you're not used to riding on public transportation, it's going to be a little bit difficult. How many of you have ever been on an elevated car before? Okay. How many of you are from Chicago? Okay. How many are from other states in the Midwest? How many are from other states in the United States? Okay. How many of you are from outside the United States? Welcome. Okay. We're going to talk about one of the most architecturally significant cities in the world. I know that Rome and Athens probably have a little bit more architecture history than Chicago does, but for a city that's a little over 200 years old, excuse me, a little less than 200 years old. This is a pretty nice city. You're going to see old, you're going to see new, and you're going to see some construction also. first I want to talk about why Chicago is the important city that it is. It's mainly because of its position on the lake. In 17th century, Joliet and Marquette were looking for a waterway between the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River. So what they did was that they found Chicago, and then they realized that through a couple other rivers you could get to the Mississippi River. Because the whole point was to worry about how to get goods from Europe, across the Atlantic, through the Great Lakes, and then down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. So Chicago became very important because of that. About the time of the Revolutionary War, which was the late 17th century, John Baptiste Point de Sable, who was a French and Indian fur trader, was the first permanent settler in Chicago. And then in 1803, the Army sent troops out and formed Fort Dearborn. In 1837, the city was chartered with 3,000 people. By 1870, we had 300,000 people. So you can imagine that it just grew and grew and grew. It also grew in terms of buildings. It was mainly made of wood. There was a type of construction called balloon construction, which was 2x4s and nails. And then the sidewalks were also wooden, and the street was wooden with pitch on the top of it. So needless to say, after a long hot dry summer in October of 1871, when Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over the lantern, the Chicago fire started. There was a strong wind coming from the southwest, blowing northeast, so it blew across the river. It blew everything that you see today was burned to the ground in 1871. So a little over 100 years ago. So what happened was that the city fathers decided they were going to build it back up. But people, the 300,000 people homeless, the only thing that remained was, if you've been on Michigan Avenue, there's something called the Water Tower, which is like a yellow brick and a yellow stone, and it's in the middle of, not the shopping center, but the water tower that's almost in the middle of Michigan Avenue if you go up to Michigan Avenue. That's the only thing that survived the Chicago fire. So the city decided they were going to build back up. Okay, so what happened was in 1893, Chicago won the World's Fair competition. So they were going to have a 400th anniversary of of Columbus's discovering America, which was called the World's Columbian Exhibition. If anybody's read the book The Devil in the White City, that was what the White City was. It was a beautiful white city that was south of the city that was going to celebrate Columbus's discovering of America. What happened was that they needed a way to get people down to the exhibition. So they had started an elevated system. It was called the Alley L, and it didn't run quite down that far. But so they extended it to get people from the downtown area to the club, to the exhibition. So that was the first elevated system. And then a little bit later, there was an elevated system from the west and an elevated system from the north. And so, but they were all separate elevated systems. So what happened was that you had to pay one fare on one, and then you could transfer to another, pay another fare. So it wasn't like this, and none of them came into the downtown. They all stopped just short of the downtown area, because the people that owned the buildings down here didn't want the noisy, smelly L. Well, then in 1896, Charles Tyson Yerkes came to Chicago and decided that he was going to make the Union Loop, which is what we're riding on today. So he didn't buy any of the companies, but what he did was he built this track system, and he also built the stations. So he didn't have any cars, so what he did was he charged all the different companies 5 cents per customer to use his rail lines. So each of them came in, and what they did was that they came in and they looped around, which is how we got the name Loop. So they came in, they loop around, they go back out. So nobody stops other than to stop people off. So the cars don't stay here, they go elsewhere. So you can imagine that this was a great transportation boom to get people down into the downtown area. So as of today, probably about 45% of the people coming into the downtown area use public transportation to get here. So Chicago still has a wonderful transportation system, and we're very proud of it. The peak ridership was was over 1 million people on one day, March 30th, 1930, when there was a blizzard. So everybody was taking the public transportation. So we're going to be talking a lot about architecture. So I want to tell you a few of the terms that we're going to be covering. One of the terms is terracotta. And terracotta is a baked clay, which is similar to your clay flower pots at home. And what they do is that they bake it and they can make different ornamentations. And as you look at some of the buildings that we see, you'll see ornamentation. That's all terracotta, which is a baked clay that's then applied to the building. We'll show you a lot of that as we go along. You're also going to hear the term Chicago School of Architecture. What happened was that after the fire, a lot of new things happened in buildings. First of all, there was skyscrapers that were built, and they brought with them engineering technology where you could grow the building up. So what happened was that they also started having elevators, so buildings could go taller and taller and taller. So we were very lucky because we had no buildings. So different architects came to Chicago and brought with them a thought that buildings should be similar to a Roman column, where it has a base, a shaft, and a capital. So that's what the Chicago School of Architecture's thoughts were. Now, Chicago School of Architecture was just a thought or a feeling. It wasn't a group of people. Excuse me, it was a group of people. It wasn't a school, such as University of Illinois or Notre Dame or Northwestern. It was just a thought or a feeling. The other thing that we're going to talk about is Chicago windows. And Chicago windows are a fixed pane of glass with 2 double-hung windows on either side. Because remember, there was not very good electricity, and there was also not a lot there was no air conditioning when a lot of these older buildings started. So the fixed pane of glass was to let a lot of light in, and then the double-hung windows, kind of similar to the windows that most of you have in your homes, the windows went up to let the air in. So we're going to see a lot of examples of Chicago windows. So I'm going to start talking about the buildings that are on the inner side of the loop, which is the side where you boarded the train, and you get to see a building that has Chicago windows. If you look at this building with the brown windows, that's a Chicago window. Now, granted, a lot of the windows have been closed up. The small ones on the side used to be double hung that open, but because of air conditioning, they've closed them off. But that idea brought light and air into the buildings, which was very important. Now, we're coming up and you'll see a building with a fire escape. And then the next building that you'll see has some terracotta ornamentation. A lot of it's been in disrepair, so it's not as beautiful as some of the other buildings that we'll see. But you see that there's a shell design at the top of the pier. Some of the shells are missing. But as we turn the corner, one of the shells is upside down. See if you can find the shell that's upside down as we turn the corner. Let me know when you see it, the shell that's upside down.
There it is.
Oh, they got it. Okay, good. This next building is by Lucia Lagrange, and it's actually a parking lot, even though it looks, on the retail level, there's retail stores. But if you look up, they almost look like Chicago windows, where the columns are on the parking lot, but it's open because it's a parking garage. The green color is similar to the green color of the next building that we'll see as we come out of the station, which was originally the Marshall Field store. It's now Macy's on State Street. And it had there were green windows, and these are also Chicago windows that we're seeing. You'll also see the older building resting on the new building as we come close to it. Marshall Field believed in giving the lady what she wants, and the women were complaining about the men smoking their smelly cigars in the store, so he built the building across the street, the one that has the 25 on it, which was the Marshall Field's men's store. So she let the men and the smelly cigars and everything go across the street so the ladies could have much nicer shopping. So it's no longer the men's store. Now it's all in one store, and of course there's no smoking, but that's a completely different time. Coming up, you'll see a white glazed terracotta building with some green windows, and that was the Vandal Brothers building, and it was also Weebles department store, if you remember a number of years ago in Chicago. It's now been divided into a number of retail stores. And then coming out of the station, you'll see a green glazed terracotta facade, and if you look up, you'll see some wonderful rounded brick. This was the Silversmith building, which is now a luxury hotel, and this was Daniel Burnham was the architect, and it's now the Crown Plaza Hotel, and they did a wonderful job doing heavy-duty windows and insulating the walls so that you can't hear the owl if you're staying in one of those hotel rooms. Now, coming up, we're going to see another building with a fire escape on it, and that is the Palmer House. And there were 3 Palmer houses on this site. The first one was only 13 days old when it was burned in the fire. Potter Palmer and Bertha Honoré Palmer were very famous Chicagoans, and they were, Bertha Honoré Palmer was one of the first people to collect Impressionist paintings. So our Chicago Art Institute has lots and lots of Impressionist paintings, thanks to Bertha. She collected them before anybody knew how important the Impressionists were going to be. Coming up, you'll see a lot of really narrow buildings. You'll also see some ads in the windows. Those ads are for us, for the L Riders, okay? What's really interesting is that we can see the original ornamentation, because a lot of times they change the ornamentation, the facade of the retail level. But we're seeing the original ornamentation, like you need office furniture, this is where you go. Coming into it, it's the university area. This building is the DePaul University. Now this is the downtown campus. Their main campus is north and west of here. DePaul is the largest university in the country. And they started a downtown campus so that people who work here could come to school after work rather easily. Now you see this surface parking garage, and there's usually a building here, and you notice the brick that's on the side of this, which is not very attractive. It's called common brick because it's on an alley, and people usually don't see that brick. You'll see the white facade that you'll see that's starting on the side and going along the street sides. So they really didn't want to pay to have the whole facade done in that because it was expensive. Why bother doing the alley when nobody's going to see it? Well, because there's no buildings there, people are seeing it. So you see the R. The R is for Rothschild. These are arched Chicago windows. This was originally, this was for the Rothschild family, and then it was Goldblatt's department store, and now it's the DePaul Center. And this is State Street, that great street. And then there's a little park called Pritzker Park. And as we come through this station, which is the library station, one of the newer stations in the Loop, you'll see a salmon-colored building, which is the Fisher building. And the Fisher was the name of the owner of the building, and the architects put a lot of aquatic ornamentation. And you'll notice the blinds down. It's now a residential building. And there used to be people that would open their blinds that lived there, but I guess they moved. They had a whiteboard, and they would like leave us signs. It was great. This brown building is the Monadnock building. And then coming up, you'll see a building that says Chicago Board of Trade, and it has some black windows on the facade. This is actually the second addition to the Board of Trade. Those windows are actually just to relieve the facade. They're not really windows. It's the trading floor, one of the trading floors for the Board of Trade. And it's so big that you can fit a 747 in there. Now, how you get it in there and how you get it out of there and why you would even want to put there, I don't know, but that's what they claim. It's also bomb-proof. It was being built when the Oklahoma City bomb happened, so they made it bomb-proof. As we come out of the station, you'll see a reflective glass building so you can wave to yourself in the windows, and you can see yourself in the window. So wave to yourself, and you'll be able to see the train.
Okay, Bobby, you see yourself in the windows?
And this is Helmut Jahn's postmodern interpretation of the Board of Trade. We'll see the original Board of Trade when we're further around on this trip. Now this white building, and see how close we come to the corner of this building. See if we're going to hit the building. See how close we are on this corner. Are we going to hit? Are we going to hit? Are we going to hit? Oh, good, we made it. That tells you that the L was here before the building. The building had to cut itself back. This is the Insurance Exchange building, which at the time it was built was the largest building square footage in the world. It was then replaced by the Merchandise Mart, which has since been replaced by the Pentagon. Now we're coming into the Quincy and Wells station. And at the Quincy and Wells station, you'll notice that it looks different than the other stations because there's vintage advertising. They brought this station back to what it would have looked like in 1897 when the Elfer opened. So there's advertising in German, which was the major ethnic group in Chicago at the time, and it also has an ad for a handsome brick cottage for $1,500. Now, you know what $1,500 will buy you now, maybe a month's rent in Chicago if you're lucky. So I'm sure that handsome brick cottage, if it's still around, it's going for a lot more than that. So we'll see some parking garages, and there has been an ordinance that parking garages have to fit into the streetscapes. Obviously, these two have been here for years, so they're not subject to that ordinance. But you'll notice some trees, and it's kind of strange to see this many trees and a little park here. It was originally a drive-through bank, and nobody wanted to drive through it but at lunchtime during the week, there's a lot of people that use that park. Because it's a Saturday, there's probably nobody in there. And then you see a gray building with white mullions in the windows. This is the 181 West Madison Cesar Pele building. And if you look back after you pass it, you'll see a wonderful grand European entrance with a translucent portico. So it's a wonderful entrance to the building. And this is the Washington Well Station, one of the newer handicap accessible stations in the loop. And all these people are looking like, why do you guys keep passing me and not stopping? The building with the gray tubing is actually the parking garage for a building that's on LaSalle Street, the next street. If you go past it and look back up, you'll see that there's windows all the way around the building. There's actually no columns on the floors because they put all the mechanicals on the other side of the building. This building with the triangular pediments over the window, which has St. Christopher and the Pied Piper, this is the Hotel Allegra. It was the Hotel Bismarck originally, which was the home of the Democratic Party during the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. It's also home to the Cadillac Palace Theater. This building with the ornamentation on it and also the graffiti, unfortunately, is the Steuben Club. And this was originally boasts a bathroom on every floor. Except for the ladies. There was only a ladies' room on the 5th floor, so obviously it was a men's club. And they didn't want us around. This intersection that we're coming up to was the world's busiest intersection for train traffic in the 1950s. There was a train that went past by here every 20 seconds, and all of these switches were done by hand. This brown building that you see is the brutalist style. It's actually attached to this cream color building. They painted this building so that it would look prettier and fit to the streetscape and put this granite facade on the first couple floors. But as we get to the street opening, look down at the end of the street. This is LaSalle Street. This is our Wall Street, where our bankers and lawyers are. And at the bottom, you'll see the Board of Trade at the foot of LaSalle Street. Up at the top, you'll see a statue, which is a 32-foot aluminum statue of Ceres, the goddess of grain. And at the time it was built, it was the tallest building in the world. So they didn't put a face on Ceres. So Ceres has no face, and obviously lots of people can see that Ceres has no face now because it's no longer the tallest building in the world, but it was in 1930. This red, white, and blue building, yes, red, white, and blue, is James R. Thompson Center, which is Helmut Jahn's interpretation of what a government building should be in America. It's actually circular and has an inverted dome inside. Coming up, we'll see the Selwyn and Harris Theaters. Actually, what they did was that they put a facade. They did a facadeectomy, where they kept the facade of the building and then they built inside of it. So the outside of the buildings were so lovely that they didn't want to destroy them. So they kept the outside of the buildings. You can see the wonderful ornamentation, and then they just built inside of it. This is actually the Goodman Theater, which is one of the regional theaters in Chicago. And we'll actually see a building where they're keeping the facade and they're building inside of it on our next trip around. Now this building with the Chicago windows that I pointed out, look at the wonderful faces and in the columns and also the mask of comedy above. This is the State Lake Theater by Rap and Rap. This is actually currently the home of ABC Channel 7, the ABC affiliate in Chicago, and this is actually where Oprah Winfrey got her start. And then you see the Chicago theater sign, which is one of the landmarks in Chicago. And then you'll see a green building, which is the Page Brothers building by John Van Arsdale. One of the buildings that was built right after the fire. And then we're going to switch sides and we're going to look at the buildings on the other side. And we're going to be turning, but I want you to keep looking as if we weren't turning and keep looking down the street and you'll see a parking garage that looks like the front of a Rolls Royce. It's got a turquoise and it's got a grill, and over the tires it says South Park. So keep looking out your left side as you're facing forward, and keep looking down there.
There it is, turquoise.
Can you see it? It says South Park, and it looks like the front of a Rolls Royce. That's Stanley Tigerman's garage. That's his interpretation of what a garage should look like. Kind of interesting. Now, often, as we come up to the station, next to the station, you'll see a really tall building that's kind of set back and then top. That's actually the Heritage at Millennium Park. And we'll see that they kept odds of the three buildings on the street, and they just built the building inside of it. Actually, it has parking in it. So you'll see, and on the street level, there's actually retail. So again, they didn't want to change the streetscape too much. So as we come out of the building, you'll see the Burton, Peck, and Couch buildings, which are not really the buildings, it's just the facade of the buildings that they kept. So they kept the facades, and that's where they're going to put the parking garages for that building. Which again is really nice because the streetscape doesn't change too much. Now coming up as we get to the opening of the street, you'll be able to see a little bit of Millennium Park and the band shell in Millennium Park. And then you'll see a cream-colored building, which is actually the Pittsfield building, which was named after the town where Field got his start. And notice the advertising. You can get your nails done, you can get your shoes repaired. Again, that advertising is for us. Unless the train goes by and then you can't see it. As we come out of the station, you'll see a blue tobacco can that says Ivan Reese. And look up, and the building is in major disrepair, but look up and you'll see some Louis Sullivan ornamentation. This is the only Louis Sullivan ornamentation that we have in the loop. And then you'll see buildings where the facade is being held up and they're building a building inside of it. This is where they're keeping the facades of the building and then they're going to build the building inside of it. So they keep it up with scaffolding until the building is built inside. And then this next building, which says 55, is 55 East Monroe. And this is Mid-Continental Plaza. And this was an interesting mixed-use building because it had retail on the first two floors, and then when you see the slats as parking, and then above it was an office tower. But what they've decided to do is to take the top few floors of the office tower and make it into condos. So it's going to have incredible views because this building has great views of the lake and of the city. And then as we get to the street, you'll be able to see the Art Institute at the foot of Adam's Impressionist collection, and then you see a building that has red bricks and gray bricks, and that's actually supposed to look like a sheet of music. That is the back of Symphony Center, which is the home of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. So it's interesting to see that they wanted it to look like a sheet of music. And then we're back to a building that DePaul University owns, and then you see a gray building, and look at how wide the bays are in this thing. The columns are very wide. This was a building by C.F. Murphy. And then next to it, you'll see a red building. And this is the home of CNA Insurance. At one point, they had both buildings and both were red, which was kind of basically so they could be seen on the skyline. Now, we're going to be turning, but I want you to keep looking straight as if we weren't turning. And you'll see a Pago sign on the wall, and then you'll see three buildings attached to each other. And the furthest building with the fire escape is the auditorium building. And the auditorium building was a theater, a hotel, and then an office tower, which you can see as we turn. And the office tower was 16 stories high. Nobody wanted to be up that high, so the architects had to put their offices there. It's now Roosevelt University, and it does have the auditorium theater still there. This building with the pink windows is the Lighter 2 building by William Lemaire and Jenny. This used to be the Sears store on State Street. It's now Robert Morris College. The red building that you see is the Harold Washington Library, and notice that there's a face on the bottom building with a necklace of corn. And that's Siri's face. Her face didn't get on the top of the board of trade, but it got here. We see a beige triangular building with little slats, and if you're as old as I am, you can remember what IBM punch cards look like, and that's kind of what it looks like. And it's actually a jail. It's the Metropolitan Correction Center, and Harry Weiss decided he didn't want to put bars on the walls, so he had to have only 5-inch windows where the prisoners are. And there's actually a recreation center way up on the top so that the prisoners can get out and get some air, but don't think you're going to go in there and get your friend out of there, because they put a net over it so you can't come in with a helicopter, because somebody tried that. So don't try that. You'll get caught. Coming up, there's a glass brick building, a glass brick facade that you see with some red granite. And that's the Chicago Stock Exchange, and that's the trading floor. And as we go past it, you'll actually be able to see that it's actually 3 buildings. It's the trading floor, and then it's an office tower, and then it's a building, a horizontal building that has arched windows. And the arched windows is actually their health club, and the road actually goes right under it. So you can be driving under it, and you can see some guy on his treadmill right above you, so it's kind of interesting. And a nice little park there. And we're going to be turning, but again, I want you to look in the opposite direction that we're turning. So keep looking down to your left, and you'll see a building which is down on the river called River City. And it almost looks like its eyes looking back at you. It's way down the other end. And that's actually Bertram Goldberg's River City. And he built up in the 80s, and he wanted it to be a whole city down there where there were churches and schools and whatever. And he didn't really get it, but now there's a lot of development down there. So we're coming up to the Quincy and Wells Station. This is where you can get off if you want to visit the Sears Tower, or if you're tired of listening to me. So the doors will open. Above, if you look at the platform and the little roof that's above the platform, when we stop, you'll be able to see the black glass building that's above there, and that's the Sears Tower. The Sears Tower is 9 bundles of tube, 75 feet by 75 feet, and it drops off at different levels. The architects were Skidmore, Owens and Merrill, and the structural engineer was Dr. Fosler Kahn. And it was originally built for Sears and Roebuck. Sears and Roebuck moved out of the building in the 90s, and then recently it was purchased, even though it was purchased by someone else, but it will always be called the Sears Tower. And it's got, it has a real upscale look, and there's upscale offices in there. That was built in the late 1800s, and this also has Chicago windows, even though they've been reinforced, you can see. And then we see some trees, and coming up we'll see another parking garage that fits right into the streetscape, which has some retail on the first couple floors. And next is a reflective glass building, and there's also a wonderful sculpture in the lobby that's been raised up a little bit so that the L riders can see it. It's called Dawn Shadows by Lois Nelson. And the building is called Madison Plaza. And notice how it's got all these setbacks, which allows for more corner offices, which means they can charge more for the corner offices. Washington Block building are the Bauman brothers. This was built right after the fire. One of the few buildings that's left right after the fire. They did a wonderful job of restoring it. I noticed they even put a new cornice up on the top, a black cornice way up at the top. And then this next building you see balconies on. And if you see a building in the downtown area with balconies, you know they're residences. So notice that the parking garage is behind these windows that we see at this level. And it used to be the home of Illinois Bell, which became Ameritech, and now it's condominiums. As we go past this garage that isn't worth talking about, you'll see three buildings, and you'll see in the middle will be a green reflective glass building, and then a blue reflective glass to your left, and then a kind of beige or gray building. The green reflective glass is 333 West Wacker, which is actually, we're seeing the back of it. It actually turns with the river, and it's the same color as the river. It's a wonderful, wonderful building. And then coming up, we'll see another reflective glass building where you can wave to yourself. This is 200 North LaSalle, also with the green in the windows. Another one where you can wave to yourself, and you can see our train in the window. Well, not if the train passes. If we pass the train, look up and you'll see the LaSalle Street Bridge as we get to the street opening. And it has four wonderful bridge houses. If you're here and the bridges are opening and closing, it really is a beautiful sight. Sometimes it can drive you crazy if you're trying to get across the bridge and you're in a hurry, but it is wonderful. In the spring and the fall, when the sailboats are coming in from the lake, it's really nice, either going out to the lake or coming in. This next building is the transportation building, 203 North LaSalle. This is actually an atrium building. And then there's a pedway system in Chicago, and at this point the pedway system is above ground, and we'll see it connecting across this street here. And then if you look up as we come out of the station, you'll see a reflective glass building with a triangular pediment at the top. And that's 77 West Wacker, Ricardo Bofield and James DiStefano and Partners. That's now the home of United Airlines. And then you'll see a grayish green building with silver mullions in the window, and that is the Leo Burnett building. Leo Burnett is Chicago's leading advertising agency, and they brought you Tony the Tiger and the Marlboro Man and the Friendly Skies. Now, as we come through this station, it's a little bit difficult to see, but if you look above the roof over the platform and look to your left, as we get to the street opening, you'll see a building that looks like it's got flower petals or corn cobs, or it looks like the Jetsons may live there. There's actually two of them. That's actually Marina City. That was from Goldberg's original attempt to get people to move into the city. It was built in 1964, and you can park your car. There's boat slips, and there was one time a movie theater and a bowling alley. Just a really interesting. Now we're going to turn again, and you get another chance if you keep looking straight to see the Stanley Tiger new garage that looks like a Rolls Royce. And now we're coming back to the station where we started, and I want to thank you. If you want to learn more about architecture, the Chicago Architecture Foundation has bus tours, bike tours, has a shop and tour center across the street from the Art Institute on Michigan Avenue, where they have wonderful books about architecture. So I want to thank you for your time and your attention, and enjoy your time in Chicago.